As for China, very, very strong financial situation, as you know. Here you have on the left-hand side the foreign exchange reserves. It is 22 months of imports for China, whereas it is for India just 8 months. It has actually, China has overpassed the $3 trillion reserves in April. Thanks to the very, very big stimulus the Chinese authority has implemented during the crisis, you can see on the right-hand side that investment is one of the more important of all the BRICS countries, but we fear a risk of credit bubble and of an increase of some housing prices, especially in the high end in some cities, which are a concern. China is trying to shift its economic model from export investment to more household spending. But you can see on this slide that it still, on the slide on the left-hand side, that it still depends a lot about the exports. Here you have, on the middle, what the household, American household, represent in world GDP. It is 18%. Whereas the household consumption of China is just 3% of world GDP. On the right-hand side, you see the evolution of the Chinese export to the advanced economy between 2003 and 2009. It is decelerating, but it is still very, very important. So China cannot afford to see its exports slowing down too much. And it is, with the inflation problem, very difficult for him to let the yuan appreciate, which would be quite a good news actually for some low-added value product companies who are dedicated to the domestic market, because with a yuan appreciation, it makes, of course, the imported products less expensive. It wouldn't be such a good news for the US because products imported from China would be more expensive. So you see that China is on a sur un fil, on a, I don't know how you say that, on the borderline, because it has the inflation, it has to see what is the limit of the appreciation of the yuan, not to impede too much the export from China. And it has increased, to try to fight inflation, it has increased interest rate, yes, but for public companies there is subsidies on interest rate, so it hasn't no effect in a way. So every year our subsidiary in Hong Kong make an inquiry to see what the Chinese corporate expects and the risk they are figuring as being a handicap for their development. Here you see in the order on the right, on the left-hand side, they fear first the withdrawal of the fiscal stimulus. Of course, that means less credit for investment. I remind you that the stimulus in China was mainly dedicated to investment, which created overcapacity. They cite as then the credit control. I would just go to this problem just in the slide after. The yuan appreciation, we've just talked about it. It's a threat for export companies. The rise in minimum wages, which is, of course, pressure on the margins of the companies, together with the oil, the energy increase in prices. As for the credit, you see what the credit was during the distribution of the credit was during the crisis. It's the thing in the middle, the very high histograms. In 2009, it has increased for 34%. Last year, 18%, and we expect it should increase again by 18%. We observe that banks, to try to avoid the control of credit, are distributing the credit through trust funds, which make things quite difficult for us when we have to underwrite, because it is very opaque. We don't know where the money goes. So the banks are just charging their balance sheets with a lot of non-performing loans, and we do not fear a banking systemic crisis in China. We think that we might see bankruptcy of small banks, but of course the authority would intervene if they could see that the banking system was going to collapse, of course. Risk, as you see with the credit, are more risk of over-liquidity nourishing the inflation. Here you have another subject of concern, which is the very high debt of the local government. With the stimulus I was just talking about, 1/3 of the stimulus was dedicated to the local government. But the local government are not allowed to leverage in China. So they created local funding vehicles, the capital of which was based on lending assets, very volatile. And we could see bankruptcy of local government. Probably that the Chinese authority, if there is here and there difficulties, will not bail out these local governments. They would bail out if there was, again, a systemic crisis among this kind of risky customers. We don't think there is a sovereign risk at all in China, because if you add the forecast, which is the highest of 34% of GDP of debt of this kind of customers and entity, to the public debt, 18%, it gives you 52%, which is quite high. It is above the average of the debt of the emerging country, which is 38%. But again, the sovereign risk is very low, thanks to the very high level of foreign exchange reserves China has, and the very high level of assets they have abroad. Here you have, if I have some time, yeah, we are over. Well, I just wanted to say that in India, well, I just go to this one. You have the business climate in China and in India on the top, and you see that in China, the main problem is the transparency of the financial data, but mainly the creditor protection. Whereas in India, you don't have this problem because, and you actually have more trials for documented litigacies, I think, because they inherited of a more complex law system with the British common law. So it is easier to make a suit in India than it is in China. Okay, so thank you very much.